interesting time. You know, we would normally be at Book Lovers Con and
BLC,
some of the
yeah,
other places, and now
yeah.
we, have to make do with Zooms and Skypes and FaceTimes and all of that. And
But at least there's that. It's still, in such, what a blessing, right?
yes. This is Sonali Dev, and she is a USA Today bestselling author. This is one of her latest books, Recipe for Persuasion. I think my first book by you was Bollywood Affair. I think I read it out of order because there was another book before that one. What was the name of that one?
No, Bollywood Affair was my first one published, but
then I read the other one next. I think, okay.
Bollywood Bride. You probably read Bollywood Bride, but both those are standalone. I mean, all my books are standalone, but I think Bollywood Bride is, even if you consider the next three kind of a loose series, Bollywood Bride is the first. But Affair came out first and has nothing to do with the other book. So you lost nothing.
Yes, and they were all so good. They were all so good. All of your books. I'm just amazing because you bring in East Indian culture. And if anybody knows me, some of my covers that you have, I have an East Indian hunk on there, Vikas Bhardwaj. But I love East Indian food and the East Indian, like I said, East Indian culture. So to have a book that brings it into a more modern perspective, the Bollywood Bride, a Bollywood Affair, and then you read another one where the woman was, a distant heart. I thought that was such an amazing time. So let me tell people more about you, because quite a few of the readers that are on today don't know about Sonali Dev, which is why I was bringing in a new group of authors to introduce to readers. You're an award-winning author as well. You writes Bollywood-style love stories that let her explore issues faced by women around the world while still indulging her faith in an happily ever after. Sonali's novels have been on Library Journal, NPR, Washington Post, and Kirkus Best Books of the Year lists. She has won the American Library Association's Award for Best Romance and RT Reviewer's Choice Award for Best Contemporary Romance, the RT Seal of Excellence, and is a Rita finalist. Sonali lives in Chicago. Oh my God, you live in Chicago.
Well, the suburbs, yes.
Yeah, but wow, you're closer than I thought. And her very patient and often amused husband and two teens who demand both patience and humor. And you have the world's most perfect dog. We can find out more about you at sonalidev.com. That's SONALIDEV.com, sonalidev.com. So in that, tell us how you got started in writing.
Oh my gosh, how much time do you have?
Oh, no. And are you able to read a little bit for us today, or you just want to chat?
I can do whatever you need me to do. I'm here for you.
A little bit of both. So let's start off with how you got started in writing.
So I have always written. I think I was writing before I was reading. And by that, I mean, I was telling stories, before I was even, reading them. And the joke in my family is that, my dad would always say that other kids, when they're going to bed, they would say, would you read me a bedtime story? Or would you tell me a bedtime story? And I would be, Dad, can I tell you a bedtime story? And so... So we used to, like, that was our nighttime ritual, was that I like to tell my parents bedtime stories. But, and stuff like, instead of doing my kindergarten homework, I remember, writing little couplet poems about the cover of my math textbook, before, and my mom calling all her sisters and saying, oh, you have to read the poem Sonali wrote, which explains why I'm so bad at math. And, But so it was, for as long as I can remember, writing has been a part of my life. I was, I moved around a lot when I was a kid. I was a military brat, so I always journaled. It was my way of expressing my opinions. I, of course, and this was sensible, wasn't always sure that it was a way to feed myself. And so I went to architecture school. I had, other careers. But then about, I think, 15 years ago, I, decided, actually about 15 years ago, my best friend is a movie producer, and she was looking for scripts and we were talking on the phone. She lives in India, I live here. We're talking on the phone, and she's like, how hard can it be? You like to write, you should just write me something. And I was like, fine, I'll write you something. And I wrote her a script, and that was my first experience writing fiction. And before that, I always kind of wrote opinion pieces. I wrote more about, more nonfiction. I wasn't writing stories, except plays for school and things like that. And so once I had done that, and of course it was terrible, and it's my book under the bed, it was just really awful, like all first books can be. And so once I had done that, once I had created characters and lived with them and created a world, and kind of just that absorption, you know what I'm talking about. And once you've experienced that, it was, you're addicted. And then I just knew this is what I wanted to do with my life. And, and initially I kind of struggled a little with what exactly I wanted to write. But then I remember the exact moment, when I knew that I was going to write these Bollywood style love stories, love stories or romances that were set in the world I knew, in my, in culturally in the world I knew. And it was that moment when I knew exactly why I've been put on earth. Like, it was actually a moment I remember forever. Like it just is alive in my head as I'm talking about it. So that was basically my journey to knowing this is what I wanted to do. Then the publishing journey is a separate journey. So I don't know if you want to talk about how that happened.
That was going to be kind of like my next question was, you're writing, but you said something I thought was very profound. And that was that's when you knew that that's when you were put on earth. That you, what book were you writing that came to be your realization there?
So I was that's such a great question. I was writing the Bollywood Bride, which is the first book that I finished. That was my first finished novel. It was the first book that I sold. Although that was the first book I sold, we switched orders because it was a 2-book deal, and Bollywood Affair came out first. So my debut in the real world is a Bollywood Affair, but the first book I wrote and sold was the Bollywood Bride. And this happened when I was writing Bollywood Bride. And it was so exactly the story I wanted to tell that, that's kind of how I knew.
Wow. So your publishing journey, you're saying your publishing journey is different. How did that come about? I mean, there are people who are dying to get, well, they're not dying, but they would love to have, that's such a cliche, to have a deal with a major house. So how did that come about?
So, so again, I was initially, so once I had, worked on that script, I had little children, I had a day job. It was, I had a lot going on, but once I had written that really awful script for my friend, and I knew that I wanted to continue to tell stories. Also, when I was writing the script, I realized what I enjoyed. So I really enjoyed getting inside the characters' heads. I really enjoyed being able to, get into, when you're writing a script, you get to tell what the story is in a much, less, I think, prose exploratory way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I knew I wanted to do more. I really loved words as much as I loved story. And so I really loved the writing process and all of that. So then the first thing I did is I went to the library and checked out every craft book I could find, like starting from how to write a novel. I mean, it was just like stacks of it. I read through that. I took classes. And I was struggling to write this very complicated kind of commercial fiction, literary fiction type story. And it was not happening. Like I had, it was like, what am I doing? And then I got sick. And again, I was talking to my best friend, and she said, and I said, this book is killing me and I'm sick. And I was feeling very sorry for myself. And my friend says, why don't you write something you love to read? And so I said, ooh, what a novel idea. And so, I mean, I loved reading romance. It was always what I zoned in on even when I was reading stories that aren't romance. I always zone in on the love arc, right? I mean, if I'm reading Jodi Picoult's My Sister's Keeper, I right? I kind of picked out Julia and Campbell's story, and that, nobody else even kind of was interested in that. And I was that's my, so I zone in on love stories. And then I had this story about this girl who, you know, um, who's grown up, who spent her summers in America and boarding school in India during the year, who kind of, has this, whose mother was very severely mentally ill and who hurt her when she was little because of the mental illness. And so she has all of this history. She's had a year-long mutism, and the only normal bubble of life she's known is at her aunt's house here in America, where she was friends with this boy. And as they grew up, they fell in love. And then something happened, and 10 years ago, they were separated, and then they meet at their cousin's wedding again. And so this was a story kind of, I think, that had lived inside me for so long. And as soon as my friend said those words, that why don't you write something you want to read, boom, like it was there. And I sat down, and I think it took me about 3 or 4 months. I had tuberculosis, I had TB, I was sick, I was quarantined. This was way before we were all quarantined. And it just, so I got to sit down and just write it. And I had heard about the RWA, and I had said, well, if I finish a book and I have a book as a reward to myself, I'll join the RWA. And we had a local chapter that I kind of knew about. Mm-hmm. And so when I finished that book, and it was April 31st, 2010, and I think on the 1st of May, I called, I called the chapter, just picked up the number that was on the website, and they said, why don't you come on in? 2 meetings are free. And so I went in, and it was like coming home. And at that point, I knew nothing about the business. So I had written this book. I didn't know. So someone asked me, have you started querying yet? And I said, what's a query? So we had kind of, that's where it started. And so I learned everything about looking for agents and how this process works. All of that I learned from my local RWA chapter and the friends I made there. And so then that was the journey. And then I started querying. Then I really figured out how that's done. I went to conferences. I pitched the heck out of this book. And we're talking 2011, 2012. So, every book in the market almost, with the exception of maybe 0.5%, were white books. No one had any interest at all in anything else back then. And so if you said, if they said, what have you written? I said, well, it's a Bollywood style romance. I actually had people going, what's Bollywood? So I had editors saying to me, you mean both the hero and the heroine are Indian? Nobody wants to read that. Like, can you make one of them white? And we're talking about you were there. This was like such a different world, right? Almost 10 years ago. It was a whole different world. And so it was interesting, but I kept querying and I kept querying. And I think I like to say every agent in North America rejected me. And so at one point I was like, I'm not going to get an agent. And then I was at a conference. I was at the Chicago Spring Fling, and Kensington was doing a spotlight. Everyone knows what a spotlight is. A spotlight is when when publishers come to conferences and do their little sales spiel, attracting authors to. So it's the opposite of a pitch. They're telling authors, come to us, bring us your stories. And so I had been to so many by that point. When he said, well, we're looking for something different, I kind of rolled my eyes. And I said, well, what would you say if someone came to you with like a Bollywood romance? And we were in the middle of this presentation. And his eyes kind of brightened up and he said, oh, I'd love that. And again, I rolled my eyes. I'm like, right. So how would you like to hear my pitch? And he said, you know what? After I'm done with this, come on back and I'd love to hear your pitch. And there was pin drop silence in that room. Because everybody was like, what did she just do? I couldn't believe I had done it. It was just completely like out of the blue. It was not planned, nothing. And so then I went talk to him after, told him about my story, told him how long I had been working on it and all of that. And I said, well, what if I want to work on it a little longer? He said, send it to me whenever you want, when it's ready. Took me 9 months because I still kept looking for agents. So, and I didn't want to. So one of the things for those of you who are aspiring authors and, one of the things you hear is that once an editor rejects a book, you can't send the book back to that editor. So I was a little scared to send it to him in case I got an agent, and then I would have one less editor to send it to. And so I waited and I waited. And then finally, when I got a rejection from an agent who had done a revise and resubmit and was very interested, so then I was like, okay, this is not going to happen. Like, no agent is going to take me on. And so I kind of gathered my wits and sent it off to the editor. And within, I think a day later, I get an email, or 2 days later, I get an email. And I said, crap, it's going to be a rejection because A, nobody can read the book in 2 days. And B, you always hear of it as being a call, or that's how it was back then, right? It's called the call. So this was the email. So I knew it was going to, and I had so many rejections at that point. And I was like, crap. And so I couldn't even open his email. Can you imagine? I couldn't open his email. I shut my laptop down. I was distraught. I was like, my life is over. This book is never going to sell. And then I went to the train station to pick my husband up. And he's like, what happened? Because he could tell. And I said, well, I heard back from Kensington. And he said, what did they say? And I said, I don't know. I didn't open the email. And so we came home and he's like, do you want me to open the email? And I said, sure. And he opens it. He opens my email and he says to me, well, this guy wants to know when he can call you. I actually dropped down on my kitchen floor and sobbed. Oh. It was the craziest thing. So that was how that first, and then I told him, I still want to find an agent because I want a career. And he said, sure, go out and look for one. And then after I had my deal, I went and I found an agent. There was people who were reading other books, and so then they were interested. And so I had a bit of a backward journey, which is perfectly normal, I think. And that was my first. So that was Kensington. Then I had four books with them. And now I'm with HarperCollins. So I have 2 out. I have 2 more coming out with them.
Awesome. Awesome. That is like, I'm glad that there is something that you said in your speech about the fact that they said, nobody wants to read that. And you proved them wrong. And well, in order to get a deal, you would have to change one of your characters to white. And the fact that you stuck to your guns and more rejection letters and you kept persevering beyond that, and got conditioned to the rejection. And it was the one that came that was not, that you're like, no, you're so conditioned for it. I can't take just one more rejection. And for your husband to open it up and have that good news, that was well worth all of the things for you to have your book the way you wanted to write it. Hey, Shayla just popped on. I met you guys out at the same time.
It was the Bollywood at RT? Was it you guys had a Bollywood event, which was crazy fun.
Yes. Hey, Shayla.
She's connecting to audio now, so
she's connecting. But yeah, that was so much fun.
Yeah. Oh. I will tell you that I still have my bags from you all's event. I was actually missing you all's event this year because I got in the bag the first year and the year after. You guys have the best swag around. I mean, literally. Somebody in the audience says, I cannot read Sonali's books until after I have eaten. They always make me hungry because she is so detailed about the food. That's Deirdre Young. She's like, no, I can't read that. And for anybody else who needs to know that is listening, RWA is Romance Writers of America. That's one of the conventions. And the other conventions we go to was RT Book Lovers Convention, but now it is Book Lovers Con. The show manager from RT Book Lovers Convention started her own event, which is Book Lovers Con. So it was supposed to take place this year, but pandemic. It's going to take place in April next year. So
Hopefully,
Lisa
yeah.
had a question for you.
I did. Hey, Sonali, how are
Hey,
you?
Lisa, thank you.
I have a question for you. With so many wonderful novels that you write, do you actually have a favorite one of your characters, and who is it?
My goodness, no, that's, I mean, my kids keep trying to trick me into admitting which one is my favorite, and I'm not going to ever do that, ever. So
Okay.
Having said that, I think it's always the one that I'm currently working on.
Okay.
Right. I mean, which is only partially true because I'm working on the third book in the series, which comes out in July of next year. And it's called Incense and Sensibility, which is the third in my Jane Austen series, which is 4 of my favorite Jane Austen books that are spun, into my own stories. And the hero is running for California governor. He is this absolutely this overachieving, tortured, all my perfect things about a romance hero. And so, of course, I'm loving him. But because it's a series, I've gone back and read, parts of the first 2 books. And I, I'm not even, this is like zero gimmicks, like zero lies. I love my characters. Like, I think I'm going to go crazy someday because they just stay inside me. Like, there's no, I love them like they're my children. It's weird.
Now, which one is the Pride and Prejudice one? Because that's one of my favorite Jane Austen novels. So have you made that one?
That one is Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors.
Yes. Okay. Let me write that down because I'm going to get it.
I have that one, and then you have this one so it's this one, and Recipe for Persuasion is the new one. Yeah.
Recipe for Persuasion is Persuasion. So this one actually is gender flipped Pride and Prejudice. So she is the Mr. Darcy and he is the Lizzie Bennet, and he's actually he's a chef, and he's a Black British chef. So grown up in Southall, England, which is this 98% South Asian little bubble in London. So he is, I love DJ. He just is this, like, I've always been fascinated by characters who, when people meet them, they think people, right? Not even characters. Like, when people meet me because of the way I look and because of my accent or whatever, right? They assign so much before I've even opened my mouth or before they've known me. And we all know this, right? Is that people will put you in a slot before they even know you. And one of the main things I think I try to explore with my books is that, that who you are and who people think you are. And just kind of that journey of people going, oh my gosh, like I was completely wrong about this person. And I think that Pride and Prejudice is exactly that story. In fact, Pride and Prejudice's original title was First Impressions. Mm-hmm. So because it is the fact that they get each other so wrong. And I think, that's so, Pride and Prejudice, I can't tell you a favorite character, but I can tell you that in a book, I think I set out to do the most with Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, just in terms of what I wanted to say and how many things I wanted to say. I feel like Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors was my most ambitious book. And, it's this family saga. So this crazy complicated family. It's a politically ambitious family. It's it had to honor Jane Austen, although it's not a one-on-one retelling. It's just an homage. So it had to honor Jane Austen. I had all these things about first impressions and the way races interact and just genders. Can you really write a woman like Mr. Darcy even in 2019? Like, I had so much I wanted to do with that book. Mm-hmm. So in terms of just what I wanted to do, I think it was my most reach book at that time. And I feel like it's exactly what I wanted it to be. So in those terms, it is very, very dear to my heart.
Awesome. Now, is there one specific thing, What's one thing that, if you can recall, that's been really memorable that a reader has said about one of your novels that really touched you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I live for um, emails from readers. I live for one of the worst things about this year has been, not having face-to-face reader contact, right? I mean, we've been very lucky that you can reach a lot of readers because the virtual platform gives you so much more access. Nobody has to leave their home. But that whole, like, just someone being able to tell you, what they loved, exactly what you're asking. But I'm trying to think. So there's like a million things, but I do know because I was telling you guys that um, Bride, Bride, jeez, Bollywood Bride, Bollywood Bride was the first book I ever wrote, and it is the story of this girl whose relationship with her mother is that her mother basically her schizophrenia is her psychosis is triggered by postpartum depression. So her relationship with her mother is that she drove her, she kind of made her mother sick for the rest of her life, right? And so she carries the guilt of that and the fear because genetically she's going to turn into her mother. Like, so that's this person who has this very tragic relationship with herself because of these reasons, right? And so I did get the most beautiful letter from a reader saying that she had a mother who was in a home her whole life, and how nobody ever understood what that meant to her and her sister. Like, nobody could internalize what it takes out from a child to have that history and to have had that life experience young. And she said, just to see that in a book, just to see that understood and to see that reflected in a book just changed something inside her. And I think of all, and I get, because I write weird, I write things that other people don't write. I get a lot of emails like that, oh, we love how comfortably you write South Asian people having sex, which is something when I started writing, a lot of people weren't seeing, good, healthy orgasms, right? And so I get a lot of, oh, I haven't seen this before and I love it. But that one from this girl, which said my sister and I kind of, have never had the experience of seeing our experience reflected, on the page, and this just changed something for us, is, I think, the greatest gift I have ever gotten from a reader.
That is awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Wow. Tell us where we can find you. Your publishing journey to me was more powerful. We're going to do readings about 5 o'clock Tribe. If you want to come back and you have time to come back and do a reading, we're going to do it then, because we have segments for the authors, and Shayla Patel's got, as they say, got next. But about 5 o'clock our time, 5 o'clock our time, which is CST, we're going to start doing readings at that point, because some people do it during their chat, but your publishing journey, that was powerful to share. And I'm glad you were able to express that, because that was so awesome and so amazing. So tell us where we can find you and find out more about your books.
So sonalidev.com, and you spelled that out for us. So which is basically my name, first name, last name.com is where almost all the information is. I am very active on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So that, and then fun tidbit is, if you sign up for my newsletter, as Deirdre said, she gets, food is a huge part of my stories. It's a huge part of my life. And when you sign up for my newsletter, you get a little free recipe book, which is recipes that are related to the books, but also some of my favorite recipes. So that's a fun thing to do. I am not one of those, I'm really, like, the one thing in my life I'm really bad at is sending out newsletters. So you'll probably get like 4. So I don't, so don't be afraid of being spammed. I only send them out when there's a new book, when there's something exciting, a free story, something like that. I have it just really bothers me to clog up people's mailboxes. So you can freely sign up for my newsletter without fear of, being overspammed. So, and get a free ebook with recipes.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we really appreciate your story. It was amazing. And I truly, for anybody who's been discouraged about the process, and there's been other authors who have been told they have to change their characters in order to get a deal. And for you to be able to represent your culture and that love, to me, that's amazing. And I love it. I experienced those cultures in my books, but to read it, for somebody who's actually lived the life, and that is their life, I'm kind of borrowing an experience, but I'm not the food though. I love the food. Oh my God. I had just had some mushroom makhani, that was breakfast. And I love ras malai, the food, mango lobster, man, don't get me started. I'm gonna put this on hold. I'm gonna go get some more food.
Yeah.
And the men too, no, don't get me wrong, especially, the guy on my cover, Vikas Bhardwaj, he was at you all's event at RT Book Lovers Convention, and he told some hilarious stories. You guys had such an awesome showing with you and Shayla Patel. It was another one that starts with an N, Narayan, what's her name?
I think
there was two other authors that were there.
There's been a few. Falguni Kothari's been there a few times. M.K. Schiller has been there. Yeah, Amali Howard. Shayla, who am I missing? Dina, who's Sienna Snow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, was Mona there? I don't remember if Mona was there. Mona
was supposed to be there this year. This was her debut year. So Mona Shroff, whose debut is lovely. So yeah.
Okay, who's the one? Because I went to the one where somebody's relative back in India sent the most amazing bags to you guys for your events, and
that was my parents.
Oh,
so every year that's my parents. This year, the one that we missed, which hopefully will happen next year, Sienna's in-laws were going, did what my parents usually do. They went and got the bags. So we worked pretty hard to get those bags, and it's a lot of
fun. I'll send you my address. I want my bag. Lisa, I'm just saying, because I still have them, and they're in my closet with my most coveted person. And I'm not a person. Just like, oh my God, those were gorgeous. So I'm just saying, I'll just send my address because I want my bag. Sonali, thank you for your being open and being so vulnerable and providing that encouragement. We really, really appreciate it. And I'm so glad that you came. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun, Lisa and Naleighna. This was lovely. Thank you. I had fun.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye now.